Hey folks, today I'll show you how to make a paper computer game. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need is a pencil. Second thing you're going to need is paper. I know, shocking, but, bear with me. So, alright. The first thing you want to do is you want to make a cover screen for your game. This is basically just a cover, so here's what you do. I'll call my game Gnome. The Return. And I'll draw a picture of a gnome on it. Good, now that you have your cover screen, the next thing you do is you have to draw the first screen of your game. So before you start, you should think of a story for your game. It can be anything, it can be about any character. Paper computer games can be anything. Before you start playing the game with your player, you're going to tell them how they got into this situation, where the game starts. So let's say you're a gnome and you have lost your wife. She's been kidnapped by trolls. So now you have to go into the trolls cave to find her. So that's where the game starts. So now you want to draw the first screen, and that's the first place that there's a challenge for their player, usually. It's a place where there's something for the player to do. Okay, so first, draw the player's character. You're a little gnome, so I'll draw that over here. Alright. And he's on a path, and here is the Troll's Cave. And the problem is that on the top of this here cliff, there is a troll ready to push a rock down. Also maybe you can put some other stuff over here, like, okay, maybe there's a little cottage over here. As you can see, my art is not the greatest thing in the universe, but that's okay. I mean, paper computer games are traditionally some of the worst arted things this universe has ever seen. So, if your art is bad, don't sweat it. I mean, do as good as you can, but the point of the game is for it to be fun. Okay. Now, you have to know, before you play with your player, you have to know what everything in the game does. So, for example, what's inside this cottage? If you go inside the cottage, is there someone there? Or is it empty? What do they find inside the cottage? You should figure that out before you play the game. And I recommend making a script or making notes for yourself so you remember what everything does. So what you do is, when you're actually playing the game, this is the player's character. When you start playing the game, you point to the character and you say, okay, this is you, what do you do? And you give it to the player, and they say, okay, for example, maybe I'll try going in the cottage. And you tell them what happens as a result. You tell them if that works or not. You tell them what they find. You say, okay, you go in the cottage and it's empty, for example. Sometimes you might even draw another screen for the cottage. Like, for example, sometimes you'll draw just like a little screen for a cottage. It's got a bed, it's got a window, it's kind of broken, it's got a door that you came in through, and you should draw your, erase some of that stuff. Should have drawn him first. You should draw your character. And maybe there's something useful on the floor. Maybe there's like a baseball. So Yeah, so when the player says I go inside the cabin, now that I've drawn the screen, you can just give them this and say, okay, that takes you here. Now you're here. What do you do? And the player will, tell you what they want to do. They can go back out. They can pick up the baseball. And by the way, if they pick something up, how do you remember what they have? Well, what we usually do is we usually have an inventory screen. I'll just use the back of the cover. That's okay. Traditionally, we draw an E at the top of it. Don't ask why. That signifies that it's inventory. And when he picks up the baseball, then you draw it over here like this. So that's how you keep track of what the player has. Don't write that until they say, I'm going to pick up the baseball. And, if there's nothing stopping them. Like, for example, if it turns out that the ball is actually part of the floor, then they can't pick it up because it's stuck to the floor somehow. So then, like, if they say, I'll pick up the ball, you can say, okay, you can't. And then you don't draw it in the inventory. So, that's basically how you create a paper computer game. So they're basically exploring this environment, and they want to try to get inside here. But if they try to get inside the cave before, they figure out how, this guy can just push the rock over. So if the player says, for example, I'll go inside the cave, this guy can say, I'll push the rock down. Well, he doesn't say that, but you, because you created the game, you can say, okay, this guy pushes the rock down and it crushes you. So what happens if the player dies? The player can say, save game, and then it takes him back in time to like right before he tried doing that. And no consequences. So it's like, but you just have to figure out what to do instead. You have to try to find a way to figure out the puzzle. Okay, so let's say he gets past that puzzle. After he beats the puzzle, there can be another puzzle. Okay, so you want to have as much variety in your game as possible. Once he gets into the cave, however he gets past that guy, let's say maybe he throws a baseball at him. Once the player says, I throw a baseball at him, you can say, okay, it knocks him out. Now you can go inside here without getting smushed by a rock. So, you want to have a different kind of puzzle after this, probably. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of puzzles you can make in your game. For example, you can make your next puzzle into kind of a maze. This is called a maze screen. You want to leave little items and things in the maze screen. Maybe you can put like a switch or a lever that in one part of the maze that does something in another part. Like, for example, I just put a lever over here, and then over here I can say that opens this gate. So when the player says I'll pull the lever, you can say, okay, you hear a noise in the background. And then when the player says I go over here, you'll say, okay, this gate is gone. It's open. You can pass through. And then, I mean, this isn't a really good maze. This is just an example. Let's say at the end of the maze, this whole maze is in a cave, I guess, because he went in the cave, but let's say at the end of the maze there's like an airplane, because, why not? And this is a runway. So then, that way, once they get to the airplane, the next screen can be a flight screen. This is a common type of puzzle in a PCG in which you're an airplane and there's like clouds and there's enemy airplanes of one sort or another, and you have to kind of duck in and out of the clouds to stop them. Usually if you go inside a cloud they can't see you, but if you wait inside a cloud too long they'll come and get you. The rules here are the same as in anywhere else in a paper computer game. It's still the player just says, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that, and you tell them what happens. Like, let's say he says, okay, I'll fly out over here and I'll try and shoot at this guy. You can say, okay, well, when you do that, this guy comes out, he shoots you first, this guy's here, he shoots you too, so your plane explodes. Then they just have to say save game in order to start over. Okay, so let's say, the plane lands, and we've landed the plane. I guess that's the plane now. You got out, and here's your wife. But she's being held captive by another troll. And there's probably some trees in the distance or something. So she's being held captive by a troll. And the only way to get her free is, well, I don't know the way, but that's the point. You have to think of a puzzle. Let's say you have to throw your baseball at him again. This isn't a real PCG, this is, just to show you. And once you do that, you are reunited, and the game is over. How do I know the game is over? Because, I just created the game, so I get to decide what makes you win the game. In this case, the goal the whole time was to rescue your wife. Once you have done that, the game is over. And that's it. That's how you make a paper computer game. But there's always chance for a sequel. Maybe, you can start the next game off by saying, Gnome 2. And on the way back home in the plane, you get abducted by aliens, or you run into you crash land in another city controlled by trolls. Who knows? The possibilities of these games are endless, and that's the fun of them. So I hope you've enjoyed learning how to make a paper computer game. Thanks for watching, folks.